Hey, welcome back. So you decided to listen to another My Sales Day podcast. You must be really bored. No, 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 I'm kidding. I'm kidding. What it means that you're here is that you are one of the few who are investing in your skill development and your professional advancement. And that is fantastic. And it's what we do here at My Sales Day. So welcome. This is a great show featuring a sit down I had with Andrew Furman. Andrew is a veteran seller who spent many years in the on the front lines before he moved up to management. He's got a lot of experience. We touch on a lot of different threads in this particular show as we do all of our podcasts, but one in particular I think is going to stand out. Andrew talks about a scenario where one of his sellers was getting bullied, intimidated, and even abused by a buyer, verbally abused. And it brings up the whole issue of where are the boundaries in a relationship when we are supposed to be cultivating trust, and yet the buyer is the one who is abusing that. So we go back and forth on some ideas on what to do in that situation, which is unfortunately a little bit more real than not. As I said, there's other threads that we hit as well: champion development, staying positive, listening. We hit a bunch of those things in this show. So it's going to be a good one. In the meantime, since you are here and you have raised your hand that you are looking to advance your skills and your mentality about your professional development, you need to go over to mysalesday.io right now and sign up for the newsletter if you don't currently receive it. Every day in your box, you're going to get one skill idea and a recommendation slash best practice on what you can do each day to advance your agenda with all of your customers. It's a 90-second read. So it doesn't take that much. I mean, it's like getting on the floor and doing 10 crunches and 10 sit-ups, or excuse me, 10 push-ups. So my sales day is the equivalent of going to the gym, going to the skills gym. mysalesday.io. Head over there now, sign up for the free 3-week trial, and then come back and listen to me and Andrew. All right, glad to have you here. Thanks. Andrew Furman, welcome to the My Sales Day podcast. How are you, Andrew?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you?
Oh my gosh, so happy to speak with you and so happy that our listeners are going to meet you. My Sales Day is excited to have Andrew join us from his home outside of Chicago. Remind me where again, Andrew? Where are you?
Northbrook, about 23 miles north of Chicago, the North Shore.
Not 22 miles, 23?
Yes. I like to be
One,
exact, Michael. You should know that about me.
I do. One might not think that the adjectives feisty, convincing, and gracious could be used to describe a single seller, but that just means you haven't met Andrew yet. Andrew Furman is all of those things and then some. For buyers, Andrew's positivity is infectious and genuine. But at the same time, he's a scrappy seller who never gives up. And I respect the hell out of that. And Andrew. How's that sound, Andrew? Does that capture it pretty good?
Can you say that again so I can write that down and post that somewhere?
I can call your mom if you want.
She already knows that, though.
Yeah. Wife? We'll do the wife. Hey, let's start with your best all-time sell. You've obviously made a ton of good big sales in your life. What's one of your Hall of Fame career defining sales that the listeners want to hear about? And of course, please tell us how you did it and what skills you used.
Yeah, so one of the things I always think about was one of the first sales that I had at Outbrain. When we first started Outbrain, we were promoting mostly content marketing, which means the only creative we could run was content that looked like it was on a publisher page, not a
Mm.
typical display ad or a video, which is what most brands had. One of the verticals we were really anxious to break into was the auto, but auto had very limited content marketing materials available. Most of it was all ads that we would not accept. So I happened to have another meeting. I had so many meetings up in Detroit, and this was with the Forward Focus team actually,
Mm.
and they told me that they were actually had these two new videos that not were the typical 30-second videos that they've had in the past, but this long form videos that featured Joe McHale and Ryan Seacrest driving around in a Ford Focus performing random acts of kindness. So at first glance, I'm like, oh, another video we can accept. But then I'm like, wait a second, this is actually content because many people love Ryan and Joel and would want to watch him and hear what they have to say. They don't care he happens to be in a Ford Focus. So I thought this may be something that we could finally accept. I brought it back to the team. I brought it back to my manager. My manager said no. He said, this is an ad. You
Why?
can't, because it's a
Oh,
video, Ford Focus. It was too much like an ad. And I
got
gave him
it.
all the information, the details, and explained how many people love Joe McHale and love Ryan Seacrest and would want to listen to them no matter where they were. And I convinced him to let my CEO weigh in at the time to get his POV. And after giving my CEO my perspective, he fortunately, smartly agreed with me. And we ran our first ever, not only Ford campaign, auto campaign. It was a huge six-figure deal, the biggest brand deals we had at the time. And that basically broke the auto vertical for Outbrain, not only in the US, but also the rest of the world.
Sweet. Okay, so I heard a few skills, but I want your opinion. What were the skills that you really had to reach deep to summon to get this thing done?
I think there's two things. One is, don't take everything for face value. When I heard a video, the automatically like, oh, no, can't do it. But like, wait a second, let's unpack this a little bit and dissect this and see if there's a way we could make this work, which
Mm,
we can. And also providing data and for your information. In order for me to
hmm
get this ad approved, I had to provide data and explain why this was not a traditional ad. Because back then, this was before the TikTok influencers, long form video was not common. So this was a kind
hmm
of a new type of experience for everybody involved. But they agreed that it was the right thing to do.
It sounds almost like one of the key skills that you used was internal navigation and internal selling. You had to get your
Yes,
CEO convinced? Is that what I heard?
yes, exactly.
That takes some muscle.
It was well worth it.
Yeah, obviously. Congrats. That's a good one. I really like that. Okay, let's move to get to know Andrew a little bit. I always like to, after that particular segment, just ask you a few questions like, for example, in 10 words or less, what do you sell?
I would say I sell digital media solutions that solve business problems and grow businesses.
Oh, how cliche of you. I'm teasing. What's the core skills that is required to be successful in that
It,
kind of a function?
we need to be, first and foremost, deliver results.
Hmm.
You have to have strategic leadership ability, and you have to have also emotional intelligence.
So, what does strategic leadership ability mean to the average seller out there who might be, well, none of the sellers who are listening are average, but to the typical seller who's listening, what does that mean in terms of leadership ability?
It takes a village, right? No matter what. You might be an IC selling something, but you're still dependent upon the marketing materials. You're depending upon the customer service to make sure it runs in the back end. You're dependent upon interacting with multiple different stakeholders within who you're selling to. And you got to think about the big picture and strategically. And how do you bring everybody together so that everyone feels like they're getting something of value and they're feeling that it's a successful outcome for all?
Yeah, we had a gentleman on the pod a few months ago, John Irvine, ironically. Hey, John. Ironically, John's based in Detroit and he's been selling the car companies for a long, long time. And big theme that came out of our show together was him realizing that he has to do a lot more internal selling and collaboration before he can actually serve up good solutions for the buyer. So I think you're talking about the same things there.
Yeah, 100%.
How many years you been doing this? How many years you been at it?
I'll just say over 2 decades, and we'll leave it at
Don't
that.
date yourself. Never date yourself, Andrew. Complete the sentence. If I hadn't gone into sales, I would have become a
Psychologist.
whoa. Wasn't expecting that, but it makes sense. But Talk to us about that. What were you on that track and something happened and you changed, or you've always been attracted to that because a lot of what we do in selling is psychology work?
Yeah, I was never outside of taking Psych 101, like everyone miserably has to take in college. I wasn't on track for that, but I just have always been the kind of person in my life, as a young person to now, with family, friends, and business associates that always try to help them solve problems and overcome objectives and put a different perspective on things that they weren't looking at in one way that makes them feel more positive about their situation.
How does somebody who's listening learn to do that quickly? Because that's not easy. What are your thoughts and recommendations on that?
Well, first, you said the magic word, number one, which is listen. And I think that's
Mm.
a lot of the problem a lot of people have is that no one listens. You have to listen to truly understand and digest what the other person is saying, their POV, how is it coming across. And then you have to be smart and think about it and how that, what you have experienced in life could bring to that situation to make it an easier path. But I think a lot of people are so quick to think of their next thing or focus on what they're trying to get across that they don't actually listen when they're having a conversation. And you can't be any kind of intuitive psychologist if you're not listening.
How did you learn listening, assuming that you agree with me that it is mostly an acquired skill? And of course, I'm referring also to acknowledging that sometimes it takes a while to learn, but how did you listen or learn to listen?
I think maybe I'd equate it to growing up. I had a big family that I was very, very close with, and we communicated a lot with each other and spoke a lot and tried. And so from this is back in the day on phones, on phone calls, and I think through that, and because they didn't live near me, the only way of seeing them and having that relationship was via the telephone. So
Mm.
we had to just I guess just it just naturally that you have a conversation or to have a really good conversation, you have to listen, participate. I think that really trained my mind to just be good at listening.
Yeah, I think it's a hard subject. I hit it a lot in the newsletter because obviously we understand that smart selling begins with big listening. And of course, there's the mantra we have two ears and one mouth for a reason, and that should represent the proportion at which we use those vital tools. But I find it pretty hard to teach it to sellers because it's one thing to say, hey, listen better. But they're trying to juggle a lot in meetings, right? A lot going on in meetings, whether it's Zoom, face to face. A lot of information is being heard. What tip do you have for the seller today? And you were in management for a long time, are in management rather. What tip did you use that effectively got sellers to be better at listening?
I mean, what I always did whenever I have a meeting, and now it's much easier with the new technology, but I always had
Mm.
a notebook out, paper out, because I was listening, but like I would write down certain key points, but not having to like worry about missing it or like stressing my mind about what that person said. I just would write it down, not pay attention to it, so I could continue hearing the conversation. And I think when you do that, it's helpful because you don't miss what is being said that you know is important, but you're not worried about internalizing, trying to think about what they're saying because you're spending all the energy listening. And now, really today, I mean, you have AI tools where you can literally bring your phone into a meeting and hit record and listen to the entire thing. So you don't have to focus at all on what you're going to say and just focus on what the client is saying and trying to absorb what is their main problem so you could help solve it because that's the whole purpose, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Don't forget that the client, the buyer, the customer needs to give approval to participate in something like that. And most of the time you can get it, but you can't, you shouldn't sneak around on something like
And this may be
recording
a
them.
plug for a tool that I've used, but we use Gong a lot at my
Mm,
previous company.
yeah.
And Gong is when you know it's being recorded right away. And I would say out of 300 calls, I only think I had one person that objected to it. I think it's becoming more commonplace now with
Yeah.
these AI type tools. They want
Yeah.
it for themselves because they want to, understand without having to remember everything that was said.
Right. They want a summary of what went on too. In last week's podcast, I had the charming and very brilliant Stephanie Russell join, and this was a theme that came up as well. And she had something very insightful to offer when she said, when the seller starts to reposition the focus of a meeting from themselves to the customer, that's when listening starts to get better. And of course, to do that, it means better preparation, better questions that, of course, are prepared ahead of time, right? And drop the preconceived notion that I have to get my message out. I have to get my value prop out. I have to get my slides delivered. No, Mr. Buyer, let's just have a conversation and make it about them. So it's a good theme. Glad we hit it. Let's pivot to your superpower. Obviously, you haven't reached the level of success you have reached without some superpowers. And of course, every seller, including you, has many superpowers. But pick one that you think truly defines you.
I would say my superpower is identifying the right individual who could champion discovery. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. When I first started with Outbrain, we were evangelizing content marketing. And this was a new concept to people. No one knew what this was. There was no buying team set up in the agency to actually buy for it. It was completely new. And, I had many meetings at the time, and I had a lot of clients, which I could tell, were listening and half listening, not so interested. But there was one specific person when in my first few months of meetings where I could tell this person, he got it. He got the spark. He was excited. He was like, I could tell by his energy and his expression how much he was into it.
Sure.
And I leaned into that with him. And, having someone who was really interested and excited in what I was doing on the other side and the buyer side to help me navigate not only his agency, but agencies his peers were at was very instrumental in connecting me with the right people that had the types of budgets and content even available for me to leverage on the platform. And this person actually not only helped me with, get many of my first buys, but also he helped me meet and hire my second hire within the
Oh my
company because
gosh.
that's how much
Oh,
he was
that's
excited
fantastic.
about
Yeah.
what we were doing. And I think there are those champions always in anything that you do. You go into a room with 20 people and there will be one champion. And it's identifying and finding that right person. And that person is going to be key to help you have success.
Yeah, you got to find the champion. There's not a big deal that's been closed on this planet without an internal champion helping that seller. It just won't happen. That person has got to be the navigator through all of the layers, not just on the buy side decision making table, but process, identifying challenges and objections or obstacles so the seller can get a leg up. So that is a key trait and skill. Were you always good at that, or is that something that got refined as well? Were you always able to kind of leverage? Because let me just interrupt myself. Observing the reaction from somebody given your story, that's one thing. But then nurturing the relationship and developing them as a champion, that is a skill. How did you get good at that?
I actually think about when I was in business school, we would go to the job fairs, okay? And there'd be different booths. And you'd walk around and meet, I don't know, 20 different people, right? And if I had the same conversation of my background, my passion, what I was interested in, out of the 20 people I met, I could tell what was that one person where their eyes sparked and
Mm,
sparkled when they heard what I was saying. And I knew this person was like really excited about what I was bringing to the table. And this person, I think, is going to be able to champion me within the organization to get my first position. And I think that, and I did that multiple times at business school. And I think that exposure of like being thrown in a room with like 20 or 30 different people of like wall to wall, like quick 3-minute meetings gave me that experience to be able to
Yeah.
understand, the human reaction and of when a champion is born.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. The first phase is observation, right? Is there a connection? Is somebody responding in such a way that I can perceive to be, hey, let's go deeper on this and I'm willing to be a partner? The second part, I would say, and I hit this in the newsletter a lot, which is to truly identify a champ, sometimes you have to ask for favors and start very slowly. Hey, are you willing to introduce me to Pete? I would love an introduction. I'll write the email for you. Are you willing to give me feedback on how the offering or how the proposal is sitting inside of the organization? Those types of little favors often give you some sort of a uh, signal on whether you are finding somebody who's willing to put in extra on your behalf. And I always say, if you're going to ask for favors, you better deliver 2x on the backside.
100%. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Let's move on. Let's talk about, hey, my favorite topic, My Sales Day, the newsletter. You're a loyal reader. Thank you. Appreciate it. What have you seen in the newsletter in the recent past that has hit a nerve that you'd like to bring up for the listenership?
First, love the newsletter, by the way. Thank
Thank
you. I
you.
appreciate it every morning. What I will say is one of the things that it's so true and so simple, but it's amazing how many people don't really necessarily follow it. Don't be boring. Tell interesting and relevant stories so you're
Yes.
remembered. And I'll just give you a quick example of when I first learned this. When I first started out in sales, I was working for a TV station company and I was repping television stations. So I had the relationship with the buyers in New York City, and the TV station from out of markets would come in, and when they came in, they'd want me to set up meetings and or lunchers and dinners with the
Right.
buyers. So
Right.
I set up this specific lunch with a buyer who I was very close with, and the guy comes in. We sit down at the table, and he literally pulls up a PowerPoint presentation. Actually,
You
not his
talk you
computer,
talk about
and
the station manager. He does
the
this.
station manager. Yes, the station manager.
Oh,
And over the course of this entire meal, all he spoke about was the station. And
no.
this, to give you some context, we're talking about like the morning news ratings going like 1 point up from like May to June. I mean,
God.
and this buyer, like, she's like, Andrew, I love you, but I don't care. There's no way I'll ever endure that kind of torture again. So you
Oh,
you can't be like that way. If people are sacrificing time of their life to be with you, provide value, be
yeah.
interesting, be relevant.
Be interesting. Tell a story. Tell 5 stories. Share something about yourself. So the "Don't be boring" headline that I actually used as a theme for one of the posts in the newsletter, I can't lie. It comes from my very good friend Lou Tosto, who is a brilliant seller himself and even better sales manager. And he would literally, in the old days of the bullpen pre-COVID, when everybody assembled in one office, he would literally yell as he watched a seller go to the door en route to a sales call, "Don't be boring." I can picture Lou pulling this off. And partially it was meant to be a loving reminder, but he was also serious. Now, the flip side is these days, in a lot of my work with sales teams and managers, I hear some sellers say, well, I'm a relationship seller. And I get nervous when I hear that. Because if you over index on the relationship side, if you take the "don't be boring" maxim to the nth degree, and that's the only place you live, then you don't know how to bring value and bring solutions to that customer. And that's scary too. That's really scary.
You got to do
You're not,
both. You have to do
you got to do
both.
both. You got to do both. Exactly. All right. Thank you for the My Sales Day plug. And I do remember that post. It's a favorite. These days, It is really hard for sellers to compete. The competitive threats, the headwinds, the turbulence, big numbers on their head. Sometimes, I bring this up every show, internal factors that aren't as supportive as they could be, whether it's resources like training, both skills and or product, or it's just management that's not supportive. Every seller deals with this. The people who are listening to us right now, Andrew, they want to hear what your tips are for how you fight through the adversity and stay positive every single day so you can bring your best self to the buyers. How do you do it? How do you get through the
Yeah,
headwinds?
that's not an easy thing because we all know as
No.
salespeople, there's so much headwinds you're dealing internally and externally with clients, and it's a really hard job. I think what's so frustrating is that there's so many things that are out of your control,
Yeah.
which is why it's so important that you focus on what you have the most control over. And an example of that would be at Outbrain. Actually, one of the things that we did, actually, you helped us with this when you was consulting with us, is that we built our team specific culture attributes that we thought made up ourselves and what you needed to do to
Mm.
be successful within the organization. I got
Mm-hmm.
all my leads in a room. We whiteboarded all these attributes that we could think of. Together as a team, identified the four that were the most relevant, and that was actually what we call TRIP, which stands for tenacity, resourcefulness, integrity, and passion. Because for us, those were the values that you needed to have to be successful at the job. You could be the greatest at the product, you could be the greatest speaker, but if you don't have passion, forget it. You're out. And we didn't just say it and do it, but we actually implemented it into the culture and the everyday talking points of the organization. I printed it out. We created a logo. I gave it to people. I had a Trip Slack channel. I hashtag Trip all the time in sales meetings.
Mm.
I would call out who on the team actually, illustrated a trip, and we would recognize them. And we even use it as a guiding light for making new hires because we wanted to make sure when we hired someone that they had these attributes, right? Or else we
Mm.
knew they wouldn't be successful. So it created this amazing sense of pride within the team and an overall sense of winnerism. So no matter what obstacles they face, and if obviously we win some deals and we lose some, right? That's
Yeah,
how life
yeah,
is.
yeah.
But they were able to recover and they quickly recognized how fortunate they were to be part of such a talented, experienced, honest, high performing team. And just being part of that team and wanting to contribute and make it better was a huge motivator.
I love that story, not because I was a part of it. By the way, you did 99% of it. I just set you guys, I put the basketballs in the gym basically and let you guys do the shoot around. But it's a powerful story that reminds us that culture is hugely important. But more than that, codifying your culture, creating definition behind your values and what's important to you creates a team bond that's going to get you through a lot of turbulence. So I really like that. Good for you. The last segment is to talk about the sticky situations that occur, the things that may not be aberrant, but are still unusual and hard for sellers to work through. You've been a seller for a long time. You've been a manager for a long time. You've seen it all. Is there any situation out there that comes under that category where you learn something from it? Help the listener out so they can get through something if they're faced with something similar.
One time I was in my office, one of my salespeople came in and she was hysterical crying. And I said, what's going on? And she said, I was just on the phone with such and such client, and she was very, very abusive to me. And the things she was saying were so inappropriate and so out of line. It just completely was unprofessional. And this girl was hysterical crying. And I don't think she knew in that situation how to stand up for herself in the right way.
Mm.
So I went and I actually called that person to
You
see
mean the
what
buy the buyer the
the buyer, and then
yeah.
actually the buyer kind of did the same thing to me, to be honest.
You're kidding
And
me. You are kidding.
no, but I stood up for myself. But it was such a bad
Wait. Slow down.
scene.
What did you say? What do you remember what you said?
I said I don't remember exactly, but I said something to the effect was I don't think what you're saying is called for. I think that you're overreacting to the
Mm,
situation. That's what I said.
mm,
I
yeah.
tried to kind of dial it down,
Yeah.
but without
They go
getting
up, we go down. Yeah.
exactly. So what ended up happening is I hung up the phone with the buyer, and then luckily I had a relationship with the buyer's boss, and I called him. And apparently, it wasn't the first time this happened, so it wasn't a surprise. And this person was so appreciative that I informed him of this because this was a problem that he has dealt with before. And like, if someone like that on my team, I would want to know, right? I mean, so he
Totally.
was appreciative about it. And then I spoke to my seller after the fact, said, "Hey, listen, calming her down. You're not, because she took it on like it was her fault. And it totally wasn't. She took the blame. I'm like, no, this wasn't your fault. This was a completely not rational action. Just because you're a salesperson does not mean that you're a punching bag. And you deserve a certain amount of respect, and you should stand up for yourself like any professional should."
Most definitely. Well, that sounds pretty grisly. Very interesting anecdote. What advice can you give for the seller who's listening who may experience something like that in the future? Or may not, but they might.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think everyone should always be professional at all times, and you want to keep your emotions steady, and there's no room for emotions in a workplace environment like that when you're having a client conversation. You want to be professional, but you don't want to be a punching bag and stand your ground.
Given that example of horrendous behavior on the buy side, what advice do you have for the listener out there who's thinking about this and saying, geez, I don't know how I would handle it?
I think you hit the nail on the head when I was telling you this story, is that when, their blood pressure goes up, your blood pressure goes down. You want to be the yin to the yang, counteract their excitement by being the calm, level-headed, unemotional person. And also, hold your ground, and be true to yourself. And you deserve the respect that you deserve.
Yeah, I think a simple comment like, hey, Mr. Buyer, I don't like the tone or I don't like the direction of where this conversation's going. And that might be enough to just say, let's table this. And if it's face to face, get up and walk away. Or if it's on the phone, just say, I'll call you back later and hang up. Because the buyer knows that they've been naughty in that situation. They know it. So
Yeah,
they're
100%.
not, they, yeah. All right. Let's end this great show by each contributing the one thing that we take away from the show that we think the listeners should hang with. What's the one thing you think is really significant from our show today?
I would say identifying the champions. It's like everything in life. Two is better than one. You don't want to go at it alone if you don't have to. If you get somebody to be your advocate and be on your side, it's going to make your life so much easier.
That's a good one. That it's tempting for me to pick the champion as the one thing as well, but I'm going to go with the debate on not being boring and the concept of being a relationship guy versus being a solution seller and having substance, because it's so easy to think that sales is just about getting people to like you, but it's deeper than that. So at the same time, don't be boring, but bring the goods, bring the solutions, bring the strategy, bring the substance. That's what I'm going with.
Couldn't have said it better.
All righty, Andrew Furman. Great show. You got to go tend to business and that dog who obviously needs dinner. But first, I got to remind our listeners why they joined us. You listened because you're trying to be the best sales professional you can be. Even if it's a little thing that you picked up today or by reading the My Sales Day newsletter, it could make a huge difference in your selling. But your mind has got to be open. Andrew Furman, so great talking to you. Thanks for joining.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. And thank you for everything you do. We all appreciate it.
And for you and everyone, remember, better habits equal better selling. Thank you for listening to My Sales Day. It was great having you here. For more, listen to our other episodes on your favorite podcast platform. And while you're there, leave us a review. I care what you think. And because I'm a seller like you, I got thick skin, so I can take anything you got. You can also visit MySalesDay.io to join our email list and community dedicated to sellers just like you. My Sales Day is a podcast by sellers for sellers. And if you got something out of today's episode, help out a friend by sharing this episode with them. My Sales Day is proudly produced in partnership with Westport Studios. Views and opinions expressed by guests on My Sales Day are their own and may not reflect the views and opinions of their organization. Start your sales day the right way with My Sales Day. I'll see you in our next episode and in the daily newsletter.